Part 1. From Tinfoil Hats to Congressional Hearings. It wasn't long ago that the idea of extraterrestrial life belonged strictly in the realm of late-night sci-fi and tabloid magazines. If you brought up aliens in serious company, people assumed you spent your weekends wearing tin foil in a basement. Then things got weird. Over the last few years, the narrative flipped. We went from blurry, fake-looking photos to high-definition military radar data. Now we have highly decorated military pilots testifying before the U.S. Congress about flying objects moving in ways that defy our understanding of physics. NASA scientists, Pentagon officials, and Harvard professors are regularly pulling up sensor footage, pointing at the screen, and calmly admitting they have absolutely no idea what they are looking at. Notice how the language has shifted to match the new mood. The government realized that the classic term UFO carries too much cultural baggage. You hear UFO, and your brain instantly supplies an image of little green men crashing flying saucers in the desert. To strip away the joke and make the science serious, they gave the concept a PR makeover. They don't call them UFOs anymore. They call them UAPs. Unidentified anomalous phenomena. The key is that middle word, anomalous. It's a careful choice. If you're playing a hyper-realistic racing game and suddenly a car floats into the sky, ignores gravity, and zooms away at light speed, that's an anomaly. It's a glitch that breaks the normal rules of reality. By using this word, the scientific community is essentially saying, we aren't claiming this is a spaceship from Mars. We're just saying these things are pulling off maneuvers that make our current understanding of physics look broken.
This sudden shift from conspiracy theory to heavily funded scientific inquiry feels very modern. But the burning question behind it all, are we alone, is anything but new. To understand why we are so obsessed with what's flying through our skies right now, we have to look back at a casual summer lunch in the 1950s that accidentally broke the brains of scientists for decades to come. Part 2. A Casual Lunch and the Fermi Paradox. In the summer of 1950, at the Los Alamos National Laboratory where the atomic bomb was developed, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi was walking to lunch with a few colleagues. They were joking about a recent New Yorker cartoon that showed cheerful aliens stealing city trash cans. They sat down to eat, the conversation drifted, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, Fermi reportedly dropped his fork and asked, "Where is everybody?" His colleagues burst out laughing because they knew exactly what he meant. Fermi was just doing some intense mental math while eating his sandwich. His logic was solid. The Milky Way contains hundreds of billions of stars, many of them billions of years older than our own sun. If even a tiny percentage of those stars have Earth-like planets, and a tiny fraction of those planets develop intelligent life, then our galaxy should be absolutely buzzing. By all mathematical logic, our cosmic neighborhood should look like downtown Tokyo on a Friday night. There should be spaceships, laser beams, or at least radio commercials broadcasting across the stars. Yet, when we look up, we hear nothing. Total, deafening silence. This became known as the Fermi paradox. If you ever want to give an astrophysicist a migraine, bring this up. A paradox is a frustrating situation where two completely logical facts are standing in a ring throwing punches, and neither can win. Fact A tells us that the universe is impossibly huge and incredibly old, meaning intelligent life must be everywhere. Fact B bluntly points out that our cosmic inbox is completely empty. No text messages, no radio signals, not even alien space trash floating by. Both facts seem true, but they contradict each other completely. For decades, we tried to solve this headache by building giant, dish-shaped antennas, pointing them at the sky and hoping to catch a broadcast. It was like waiting by the phone for a crush to call. But as the years turned into decades and the phone never rang, the scientific community realized something important. Maybe we were looking for the wrong thing entirely. Humanity needed to get proactive. We needed to stop listening and start looking for something much smaller, and frankly, a lot smellier. Part 3. Sniffing for alien breath. The strategy today has completely shifted. We aren't just sitting by the giant radio dish waiting for ET to phone home. We've received a massive technological upgrade with the James Webb Space Telescope, essentially a $10 billion pair of golden glasses parked in deep space. Thanks to the JWST and other modern observatories, astronomers aren't looking for giant metal flying saucers. They're looking for alien pollution, or maybe just a bunch of alien bacteria burping out gases. They do this by watching distant planets pass in front of their host stars. When the starlight shines through a planet's atmosphere, it changes color slightly. Analyzing those colors tells scientists exactly what kinds of gases are floating around in the air of that distant world. They are hunting for biosignatures, the chemical autographs left behind by living things. If you're walking down the street and smell burning charcoal and roasting meat, you don't need to see the grill to know someone is having a barbecue. The smell is the signature. In space, Finding gases like oxygen mixed with methane in a planet's atmosphere is like smelling a cosmic barbecue from trillions of miles away. It tells us something down there is breathing, growing, or burning fuel. But this brings us right back to Fermi's wall. If we now have the technology to sniff out alien breath across the galaxy, and the universe has been around for over 13 billion years, why haven't we found anything yet? To answer that, scientists came up with an idea that is equally fascinating and terrifying. They call it the Great Filter. In astrophysics, a filter is like a massive, terrifying bouncer standing outside an incredibly exclusive nightclub. The theory suggests that to go from simple, single-celled bacteria to a hyper-advanced star-trekking civilization, a species has to pass through several deadly evolutionary checkpoints. This bouncer is incredibly strict. Maybe the jump from single cells to complex animals is practically impossible. Or maybe once a civilization discovers how to split the atom or manipulate its climate, it inevitably ends up destroying itself before it can ever leave its home planet. The Great Filter stops almost everyone from entering the Galactic Club, which leaves us with an uncomfortable question. Are we the rare VIPs who already sneaked past the cosmic bouncer billions of years ago? Or is the bouncer still waiting for us, standing silently somewhere in our near future? The next time you walk outside on a clear night, look up at the stars. It might look quiet and peaceful, but hiding behind that silence is the greatest mystery of our existence, one we're finally building the tools to solve, assuming we survive long enough to find the answer.